Hello everyone! Today we're going to take a look at my 2.5-week journey in learning Godot and how I made a local multiplayer party game. I took a quick break from Project Meatball to learn Godot and practice making smaller projects, and to give my artists some time to create some artwork so I can replace the crappy programmer art and borrowed backgrounds. So, I gave myself a limit of 2 to 3 weeks to finish a game. I'm not going to bother going into detail about how I downloaded and installed Godot, I'm sure you can figure that part out yourself. I knew I wanted to make a 4-player local multiplayer party game, something like Towerfall or Stick Fight, and I came up with this idea that you will have a spike ball attached to you via a rope or chain, and had to swing it around to hit other players while avoiding their spike balls and your own. This just felt like it would be instantly fun. So, I started with watching a tutorial on how to create a platformer in Godot from scratch. Got about halfway through, which got me familiar enough with the interface, the concept of scene trees and nodes, and the basics on GD script. I followed along enough to get a character on screen moving on key presses and adhering to gravity. I was happy with that, so made a few modifications on my own to allow for acceleration and deceleration and friction. I then decided to make a spike ball that would follow the player, and draw a line between the two objects. It took me a while to figure out how to get two scenes to communicate with one another. Scenes, by the way, are Godot's version of Unity's prefabs, not literally scenes, although they can also be that. Basically any collection of nodes or game objects is a scene. So, I had a player scene and a spike ball scene. I specifically couldn't figure out how to access variables from another scene, or how to call its functions. I knew I could access nodes or rigid bodies, but I couldn't figure out how to get the script, or cast them into the type of game object I needed to access the right functions and variables. I kept coming across signals in my research on how to do this, and may have gone a little overboard on my reliance on signals. For the programmers out there, signals are Godot's version of the observer pattern. I had the player character constantly signal their position, and the spike ball listen out for that position to figure out how to follow. It worked, and it did work well, but resulted in very messy code. I later watched a completely unrelated tutorial and noticed you can do this. I had a big, wait, you can do that? Moment. Unfortunately, I'd still been stuck in C-like language mode, where you have to cast something to the right class to access the methods and variables, but I do recall doing something like this in JavaScript, where you could just attempt to call any function or variable, and then just had to make sure to run the right checks to avoid an error, so I do feel a bit silly for not figuring this out sooner. Anyway, after I got the spike ball and player playing nice, I added a second player and set up the controls in Godot's input manager. At this point, the spike balls just bounced off the players and left a log message to indicate the player was hit, so I had to figure out how to kill the players. I made my first ever particle effect for the blood and coded in a blood spawner that listens for the player's death signal and spawns a blood particle at their position. The player then teleports instantly to the respawn point along with the ball. I wanted the balls to bounce off each other, so I coded that in, and it added a nice bit of chaos to the game. I even made my first ever sound effect by clanging a fork and a spoon together and slowing it down in Audacity. I really like how this came out. I figured this would be a great time to try adding a bit of juice to the game, so I looked up a tutorial on adding screen shake. I think this might have been the tutorial where I noticed you can just call functions straight from a find node, so up to this point everything was signals, but let's not get into that again. So, I added in the screen shake, which also taught me a little about Godot's camera system. Handy. Slow-mo was really easy to add, as like most engines there is a built-in game speed that can be changed to speed up or slow down the game, so apart from googling exactly what this is called in Godot, it's engine.timescale, by the way, this took very little outside help or research to get working. At this point, I also decided a double jump would give the players more control and allow for better levels, so I added that in too. I've been using placeholder graphics at this point, so decided to try using a color palette. And the game looked like this, but I received some feedback that the background was a little too dark. So keeping the same color palette, just swapped things around a little, and at some point I also punched a wet sponge to make a death sound effect. At this point, the gameplay was more or less down, so it was time to add scene changes. That's scene as in levels, not prefabs. So, I put together a very basic main menu with a button that started the game. The players were still part of the level at this point, so I had to remove them and code a game manager that would spawn them in, allowing the main menu to tell it how many players to spawn in, as this is meant to be up to 4 players. So I did that, learning about Godot's auto-load scenes, which allows you to keep scenes in memory while swapping out levels. I had a few issues related to some arrays not being reinstantiated when reloading a level and filling up with junk data, and some code in the ready function not running when I needed it to, which was all fixed by using the auto-loaded game manager to handle when all these happen and in what order. But, after not too long, I had the ability to select a number of players and load the next level. I needed a win condition, so I added the ability for the game manager to keep track of time and track scores. I added buttons and a slider to set the time and score limit, and created a quick score screen that pops up when either the time limit or score limit is reached. I had a quick playtest session with a friend over Parsec. Parsec, by the way, is amazing. It's a remote desktop software specifically optimized for gaming, so my friend just remoted into my PC, and we were playtesting my local multiplayer game over the internet. God, I love living in the future. His main feedback was that it was too easy to kill yourself and there wasn't really any way to attack the other player, so much as just hoping they hit your ball or their own while you dodge around. So I added a button that pulls the ball towards you, which doesn't change the whole killing yourself part all that much, but gives you more control over when your ball is changing direction, and hopefully should lead you to catching your opponents off guard more often. I recruited 2 more friends for another play session, and well, we had fun. Lots of it. After one game I basically said that we're done, but can play another if they'd like, and they cut me off to say they really wanted to play again, so I was happy. Anyway, I made sure the character models turned around when going left, as this whole time they were just facing right, and built 2 new levels for a total of 3. Put together a very quick logo and added some music, and boom! The game is available for free on itch.io, link in the description below. In conclusion, well, I had a hell of a lot of fun learning Godot and making this game. I'm proud of it. I know it doesn't look like much, but it's a game that my friends and I genuinely enjoy playing, and apart from the music, I made everything from the code to the graphics to the sound effects, and I never thought I'd make my own sound effects. One of my biggest weaknesses is finishing projects. Mine's in like the vast majority of small-time developers, I'm sure. So, creating a game with a strict time limit and actually finishing it is something I am very happy about. I know there's loads of room for improvement, and one day I might go back to the game, but for now, it's at a stage where I'm happy to present it to people and have them play it. If I do though, I'll probably rebuild it from the ground up in Unity. The code is an absolute mess and not something I look forward to revisiting, but the main reason is that my research tells me that, while it is possible, porting Godot games to consoles is a pain and requires third parties that can get pretty expensive, and if I ever want to make a commercial version of this game, I absolutely would want it on the Nintendo Switch. In the meantime, however, I need to get back to work on Project Meatball. Got a fair bit of artwork I need to put into the game and a playable prototype to build. So, as usual, please subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment below, and more importantly, see you in the next video. Bye!